Detroit has become the largest U.S. city ever to declare bankruptcy. That happened just recently. They're attempting to walk back or walk away from $18 billion in money that they currently owe. Some of it legitimately, some of the money that they owe is, I believe, illegitimate. But yeah, so they did that just today, and it was actually kind of interesting the way that they did it. Somebody was stepping in to try to stop them from declaring bankruptcy because of worries about what it could do to the city's pension funds. And they pulled this legal trick where they said they wanted to take a 5-minute delay, and then during that 5-minute delay, they went to a different court and declared bankruptcy. So I don't know if I really like the way that they did it, but it's interesting if nothing else. And we have some details for what's currently going on in Detroit, but very large city, obviously, pretty tragic that it's come to this, but what do you think?
So we did a great documentary on TYT Investigators. It's the first one we ever did for the Young Turks. It's called Who Took Down Stockton, right? So Stockton went into bankruptcy. It was the largest bankruptcy before Detroit. So until yesterday,
Stockton, California.
Stockton, California was the largest city in the country who declared bankruptcy. And when you look at it, it's very similar to Detroit. It's complicated factors. There is overspending by the government. For example, in Stockton, they built this huge stadium they didn't need. There are no teams in Stockton. They lose money on it. It's ridiculous, right?
The ports in the Class A California League, the Stockton ports.
Right. So, and you know why? It's a vanity project. So the mayor at the time gets to say, I built that, right? Yeah. That is my Coliseum, right? And then there's the pensions, and for a while Stockton was paying a little more than average in California. Now they pay a lot less, right? So, but that's not overwhelming. And then there's a third element, which is the banks. They come in and they go, oh man, wouldn't a stadium be awesome? Yeah. Oh man, it would look great here. If you buy our bond, it'll be so affordable, right? So one, they just shepherd you in because that's how they make money off of it, right? And then number two, there comes the little tricks like, oh, yeah, I mean, don't worry about that fee. That'll only happen if this happens, which is very likely. But anyway, that might not happen for a year and a half when you won't be in office anymore. And they load it up. In Detroit's case, they had $500 million in just fees. Yeah. We're not talking about interest rate. We're not talking about things you get for a loan legitimately. In fees, $500 million.
That the banks were helping to manipulate to make sure that they would have to pay that. It's not just malfeasance on the part of Detroit. We need to be clear there. But.
Absolutely. So their mayor was a mess. Everybody knows that. And, he wound up going to prison. And so at the same time, when they go to bankruptcy, they're going to have to judge who gets screwed, okay? Because the city can't afford to pay all their bills. So now some of their bills are to the bankers who they borrowed money from. Now, look, if you borrow money from somebody, you should pay them back, right? All things being equal. So now, some of the bills are to the people who worked at the city for decades, their whole lives. They now have a pension, whether they were cops trying to protect the city, wish them luck. And you know that the ambulances are now cut to one-third. Yeah. I mean,
and
when you
40% of streetlights.
Yes. 40% of streetlights are working. That's unbelievable.
That's thankfully, at night, in the dark, Detroit is America's safest city, so you don't really need the streetlights.
Yeah, you don't need it. And then you don't need the ambulances at all, right? Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's some third world stuff. I mean, that is scary stuff, right? So, and then you got the pensions. You got to get the streetlights working. So you got to figure out a way to get all this money to work. So that's going to pit the bankers against the guys who have the pensions, because the bankers are going to say, I want 100% of my money.
It's probably roughly equal in power and political influence.
Yeah. Good luck to the pensioners, right? Yeah. And the pensioners are going to say, wait a minute, you made a promise to me. I worked my whole life. If I'm a cop, I'm a firefighter, I endangered my life for 30, 40, 50 years to get this pension. And now you're going to pull it away from me? Now, I think the most compelling argument, whether you have malfeasance by the banks or not, is as an investor, and I've been an investor in the past, you know that with every investment, you take a certain degree of risk. You're not promised anything. You're promised a return if things work out. Yeah. But every single investor knows that they might not work out. And everything has different varying degrees of risk. Some are very risky, some are very unrisky. So you took this risk, and apparently it didn't work out. If I was the person in charge of this bankruptcy, I would say to all the investors, even if I was one of the investors, it might be other pension funds that invested in Detroit because of all the different things that go around in the financial world. So I'm not saying I hate the people who invested in Detroit and I'm going to cut them mercilessly. I'm just saying if I was the guy in charge, I'd say, well, you obviously have to take a big, big hit here because your investment didn't work out. And that's how investments go. But to turn around to the guy who worked for 30, 40, 50 years and say, well, we lied to you, and so I guess that didn't work out for you, is a different ballgame. Now, if you want to say, hey, pensions going forward, hey, man, we can't get the ambulances to work. pensions got to go down. That's a different question.
Totally. By the way, the guy who's making these decisions is named Kevin Orr. He spells his name with a Y in Kevin, so I already don't trust him. And
Good reason.
He's the city's emergency manager, unelected, and there's no more powerful mayor in the country than Kevin Orr, the bankruptcy manager here, the emergency manager in Detroit. You mentioned the trick. I don't think we dwelled on it quite enough, because what the lawyers for the pensioners had an agreement with a judge. Judge was clearly going to grant them a temporary stay against the bankruptcy filing to protect the 30,000 pensioners of the city of Detroit. And then the lawyers for the city, looking to get the bankruptcy filing, said before that court, oh, just give us a 5-minute recess to get our papers in order. And they went to another court and filed it. And that judge was like, I was going to grant your injunction, but they filed it in another court.
You know what that tells you?
That's a suggestion that when it comes time to make the decision between the banks or the pensioners, which way it's going to go.
Yeah, he's going to screw the pensioners. He just screwed the pensioners.
just screwed them.
Lied to them. Yeah, I mean, how much can you trust the guy who said, "Oh, don't worry. Oh, yeah, just give me a 5-minute break. I got to go take a leak," right? And he goes, "Ha! I filed in another court. I totally screwed you over. I totally lied to you." And that guy's in charge. They call it.
That was the lawyers for the governor who did that, Rick Snyder, who
right,
we know
the governor who's appointed Kevin Orr, right?
Right.
And what they call this financial martial law. Like these managers that the governor appoints. He has absolute power. Now, if you get into bankruptcy, though, then the judge will have some power in how things are divided, et cetera, right? But for the moment being, the financial manager is the guy making all of the decisions. So that will then get adjudicated later. But obviously, if you're in Detroit, you shouldn't trust Kevin Orr at all.
But by the way, these financial managers that have unlimited power to do whatever they want, most powerful mayor in the country. The good thing is that the history of these managers is that they always fix the problems.